Chris, thank you for joining me on our Thought Leader Spotlight series. I'm your host, Matt Camp, head of partnerships for DealMachine. On these, we really like to shine a spotlight on industry experts like yourself to hear your inspiring stories and to educate our audience on the lessons that you've learned and really how you see the world evolving. So really excited today to welcome on Chris Senegal. He's a real estate investor and developer, and including a really interesting $1 million crowd fund last year. He's a social impact investor. I know you have a passion for investing in flips and rentals, but also really in disinvested communities and then providing quality housing options for surrounding communities as well. So we'll dig into that today.
Yep.
You're an entrepreneurship advocate, a financial literacy advocate, and you put out awesome content on YouTube, Instagram, Clubhouse, all over the place. Yeah. And then obviously you've got your courses and your consulting at chrissenegal.com. So welcome on, Chris.
Thank you. It's an honor to be here.
Yeah. And to get, today I'll really dive in with you on the housing market, and then really how you've kind of cracked the code on anti-gentrification. Really, I love to hear more about that topic. So
sure.
To start off, can you maybe tell us a little bit more about your life journey, your journey as an investor, kind of a little bit more about you for our audience?
Yeah, sure. So grew up in Port Arthur, Texas, went to college for civil engineering, went out and got the good corporate job working for the railroad. And, it was coveted by most people, but for me, it was just like, I feel like I've been sold a dream. I'm not really into this. Started reading books, just started figuring out my escape plan really. And real estate just kept coming up, first generation wealth creation tool. It seemed to be pretty consistent everywhere I went. So I started focusing on real estate like a year out of college. And within that first year, started flipping houses and building a rental portfolio. So I kind of went backwards from what most people think is the order. I started wholesaling later on. But yeah, that's how I got into it. And around 2013, I realized, when you touch on the gentrification thing, sometimes as investors, we don't realize that we can actually accelerate the gentrification in the communities if we're not cognizant of what we're doing. So for me, that became a mission. It's like, how can I still do this? How can I still make money without having a negative impact on the communities that I'm making my money in? So that's pretty much the journey.
Yeah. And we'll dig into that here in just a minute too. But I know one thing that you mentioned you're often asked about and look to, and really more of a thought leader in is just kind of our current real estate market and where things are headed. I know you've mentioned kind of this pending foreclosure situation that we're all looking at. Can you maybe educate our audience on what you see there, what you see coming?
Yeah, so I mean, the moratorium, it was a blessing for a lot of people, I believe, that had no other alternative means of staying in their homes. But eventually it's going to come to an end, and when it does, there is going to be a lot of inventory in the market. It's probably going to depress some prices because it'll be such a flood into the market. So it's a good opportunity for investors. From my perspective, some of the things that I've been telling people and gearing people up to do is to focus on not so much just taking the deals from the homeowners. If there's a way that you can work with them where you buy it with equity in it and then rent it back to them, a lot of them will rebound. A lot of them will get jobs again. Their credit will be messed up for a while, but they could be your tenant, and eventually, hopefully, their credit gets good enough to where they can eventually be in a position to buy the house back from you at some agreed upon number. So just thinking of creative ways to do deals with people so that you don't go in and kind of be an opportunist and kind of, I don't know. I don't want to use too many negative words. The word vulture keeps coming in my head, but a lot of times it's not really that. We just, as investors, we don't really think about the full picture. But yeah, I want to try to make people think about the macro impact of what they're doing in their real estate investing businesses.
Yeah, I mean, I think we've talked in the past about how you really feel as though you've really kind of cracked the code on how to invest in neighborhoods without displacing residents like that. And you've been getting shout outs all over the place about the stuff that you're doing in Houston. So I love seeing that, man. But can you maybe talk a little bit more about that and like how you mentioned you're kind of trying to take control of the narrative around the word gentrification and what that means?
Yeah, so when you think about gentrification, usually it has a negative connotation because it's usually associated with displacement and pricing people out of a community. But if you look at the textbook definition, it just says taking something from a lower class and making it a middle class standard. The problem usually is the people that are making it middle class aren't from the community, so they aren't really community focused. They're in the business to make money. So if a group of investors can understand that, hey, when there's a big announcement, there's a big catalyst coming to a community, specifically like what's going on in Fifth Ward. There's a $2.4 billion development coming, mixed use development. So instead of trying to fight it, buy up as much real estate around it as possible, because you're about to ride a value appreciation wave. And in that process, you can pick up investment properties, you can hold land, and just the inherent ownership is going to increase the net worth because of all the activity in the area. And what I try to do is, if I'm going to do new construction townhomes that are going to be for sale, I look for vacant lots. I look for abandoned property. I look for blighted property, so that in the acquisition process, I'm not displacing anybody. At the same time, I can do market rate new construction and bring higher incomes back into the community. And with those higher incomes, the demographics look better when it's time to go ask a grocery store, would you like to move back to this community? Would you come back into this neighborhood? If we're always focused on the low income housing and those types of things in these communities, the demographics will never change enough for the incomes to be attractive for any type of business to really come back and be able to survive. And on the other side of that token, people always talk about, well, what happens with existing residents? How do you get the local government to put rent controls in place? And that's mixing politics and business and capitalism. It never really works. So if you want to control the rents, the best way to do that is actually own the real estate. So then you can control whatever rent price you want. So if you can look at your baseline of what you want to be your ROI to be on your investments, you got to look at value appreciation, and you look at cash flow. Sometimes you don't have to increase the cash flow so much to where you price the tenants out. Maybe it's sustainable where you keep the rents where they are, increase them modestly while you watch the value appreciation go through the roof. In most Houston markets, most Houston neighborhoods that have had a revitalization, gentrification, values have tripled at minimum on those real estate assets. So same thing here. So just trying to make people think about all these other things. It doesn't have to specifically just be about go in, do a big renovation, and raise the rent.
Yeah. I mean, it's inspiring, man. I mean, what has given you that passion? Like, what came, what brought you to the idea of buying the block and all of that? Like, can you tell us more about why you're so passionate about this?
Just being an investor for so long, and it was just a question that was always in the back of my head. Why is the narrative always this way? And especially being an investor, even working in a corporate environment with other people that weren't in real estate, I always got the negative comments about, so what are you doing in the community? Are you displacing people? And it just kept resonating with me. I was like, there's got to be a better way to do this. There's got to be a model that works where we can tie everything together. And I mean, in reality, anything has a life cycle, including neighborhoods. So it has to be renewed. It has to be, revitalized, so they can have a second wind. And so that's just been my focus, is figuring out the best way to do that. And I think a little bit of it was the motivation by everybody telling me it was impossible, and I was like, no, I know it can happen. I know I can do it. Yeah. So.
Love it. Yeah. I mean, do you think, is this something that, for newbies, they can really follow in your footsteps? And can you kind of give us the playbook there of, I know you touched on it a little bit, but specific action steps of anyone listening to this, if they're just getting into real estate investing and they've identified an area that fits a lot of the descriptions you're talking about, that they, potentially want to get involved in, what are kind of those steps in that playbook they should follow to do this?
Yeah. So number one, if you're going to look for a market that's going to have some type of revitalization coming, you want to look for key indicators. Key indicators are going to be city plans that announce that they're looking to focus on a specific area of town. And you're going to follow those plans until you start seeing activity there. So riding around the neighborhood, when you see more new construction signs, when you see development signs that say there's a variance, there's some type of hearing because the use of the property is going to change. You see anything on the news, a big announcement about a developer just bought property in the area, or title companies that may know where builders are buying, getting ready to do new projects. All those things are areas that you want to focus on. And then if you're going to go in and say you're wholesaling in that market, like I said, target all the abandoned, target the vacants. I know a lot of us are taught, go knock on doors and talk to existing owners, and that's cool, but that does lead to displacement when you take that, because you're taking somebody out of their home, or you're talking to a tenant that's there that maybe on a fixed income and you're asking for their landlord's contact information, and then the landlord sells to you. Now this person has nowhere to go, so, but there's a lot of opportunity most of the time with the vacant properties, with the abandoned properties, with the nuisance properties, where you can still make some pretty good money off of that. And what I also try to advocate for, especially with new wholesalers, is the big checks are so attractive, but you really have to think about the person on the other end of that deal. A lot of times, especially if they're older and they don't have large streams of income, you walking away with $30,000-$40,000, and this person may not have another source of income for the next 40-50 years they're alive. You're taking a lot out of their pocket for a personal gain. So I always say, try to be as ethical as possible. Keep your business afloat, make some good profits, but just don't gouge people, and don't be a vulture, and take the opportunity to take advantage of someone's lack of knowledge and education about the value of their real estate that they own.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, one interesting thing you touched on briefly as well was the whole like macro impact of this, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, especially for our more advanced, maybe higher volume investors, that listen to this, can you speak to that and how, the right way to think through the macroeconomics of this?
Yeah, I think of course it varies from market to market, right? So some markets it may be easy to have 10 deals and get a $20,000 spread on all of them, but that's because the as is values of properties are drastically different. The delta is huge versus what they're going to be worth when they're rehabbed. I think Philadelphia is one of those markets where they buy stuff really cheap, and as soon as it's done, it's $200,000 in equity built into it.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, I think when you're moving at scale, it's kind of hard to be as personal with each individual homeowner, but I would say it would be around training your teams to ask the right questions to see what that individual person's true financial situation is, because when you go in and you completely change one community, take a lot of the inventory off the market and reposition it with investors, it can have negative impacts, especially if you're selling to hedge funds. I'm touching a lot of hot buttons, I'm sure here, but selling to like hedge funds where they're really just buying the property and not really going to do anything with it. They're just going to hold it for a while and maybe renovate it next year. Well, that's one less opportunity for a home in a community to be brought back to life and bring a family in, whether as a renter or a homeowner. So this is definitely a social mission as much as it is a profit-driven mission. So it's not for everybody. Some people are just like, hey, I just want to make my money. But that there is a bigger impact that happens with every decision that you make in your business.
For sure. Yeah. I mean, and it's clear, like, how much that kind of social impact really drives everything you do too. So, is there anything else in terms of, I know you're obviously consulting, other investors and whatnot. Are there any other things that you're hearing from them right now that are more timely that you're trying to help prepare them for within the market? Just since I know you have such a good pulse on the market right now.
Yeah, I think what's happening here in Houston is I think some of the guys are not really ready for the level of competitiveness that's about to happen once once the moratorium is fully lifted. I mean, here in Houston, there's an article that went viral recently that the first tax auction they've had in over a year happened last week, and a house went from 13 grand up to 78 grand in a neighborhood where usually would only sell for like 45. So there's going to be demand. There's going to be a lot of inflation in the market. And I don't want people to be so focused on getting a deal that they get into a bad deal. Just because you see other people bidding prices up doesn't mean you should lose your standards and your blueprint for what your price point should be when you're trying to acquire deals or get into deals, especially if you're going to be wholesaling, because nothing's worse than getting a deal under contract and you can't move it, because you've overpaid for it, or you got the contract price too high to where no investors are going to want to buy it from you. So sometimes when you get in that environment where there's prices are being bid up, you want to be in a position to actually win a deal. And winning a deal sometimes is actually winning a headache, because you're going to be overpaying for it. These markets are going to be pretty competitive for a while. I would say maybe look at smaller markets where everybody's eyes aren't focused on. if you want to try to snag up some good stuff. But like I said, Houston for the next year, I think it's going to be pretty crazy. A lot of pent up capital on the sidelines from big institutions and big investors that are going to drive prices up, and it's going to make it really hard for the smaller investors to be competitive when it comes to buying anything.
For sure. Yeah. And then, I don't want to go too far into saying like, here's why DealMachine's so great, but I know going into this, you'd mentioned that, obviously, you've used DealMachine, yourself, you said you're currently in a building that was, found by a student.
Yes.
DealMachine.
Yeah. So this building, so actually is a wholesaler from Mississippi that's just riding around Houston. And he found one of the properties that's in this little portfolio, tracked the owner down through skip tracing, called him, and they told him basically, hey, you called me at the right time. I'm really selling this whole portfolio. It's 19 houses and a commercial building. Yeah, it really worked. And it was, off market, no competition, because it's not on a tax lien list or foreclosure list that's being flooded by people. So that's the beauty of DealMachine, really, man. You can get the one-off deals that a lot of people or hardly anybody even knows about if you're diligent. And first movers advantage in that situation. So I think that it's something that should never be overlooked, for sure.
Yeah. And you even mentioned like there's a couple of creative ways that people have been using it, like whether it be realtors with listings or everyday homeowners. Can you talk on a couple like the creative things that you're hearing just because you talk to so many people in the market like that?
Yeah, man. I mean, I'm actually an advocate for it. I tell them, this is a better way for you to go get deals. I mean, wholesalers and investors use it, but if you're a real estate agent and you're trying to get more listings, man, you can do the same thing. If you see a property that looks like it's in distress, or anybody, the neighbor tells you, hey, the house down the street that those guys may be wanting to sell, you can use DealMachine to track down the owners. I also tell people that have like corporate jobs, or any type of profession where real estate isn't their main source of income, but they want to just own rental property. It works for you too. I mean, because you can still find off-market deals. You may be able to pay a little bit more than the wholesaler would be willing to pay, give to a seller, because you're more focused on cash flow and long-term ownership. So DealMachine can be that vehicle for you also to go out and source your own deals, your own property, your own investments, and build your portfolio that way. So yeah, I mean, it's an awesome app. I like the fact that you guys have on there where people can track their pipelines. They have the CRM tool. Really makes it convenient. It's like a one-stop shop.
Yeah, I appreciate that, man. Yeah, I've really enjoyed it. I mean, listening to you on Clubhouse and a couple other places. You're putting out great stuff, and I think for today, gave us an awesome, inspiring blueprint of how to think on a bigger scale, which is something that I think if you get in the weeds every day and you're hustling to find the next deal, it's not always the first thing you think of. So I appreciate you giving us better perspective overall. But
awesome. Yeah, I appreciate the opportunity, man. Yeah, this is cool.
Do you have any other kind of final parting advice especially for newbie investors that are looking for that first deal?
I would say just be diligent and be consistent, and don't be afraid of the no's. The no's are going to come. It's just part of the process. That's not anybody doing anything personal to you. It's just not the right time for them. But I would say keep those follow-ups going. The fortune is in the follow-up, and a lot of people get deals on the seventh or eighth time following up with the owner. So I would say be consistent, drive as much as possible, and lock in as many as you can by just going through sheer numbers. It's a ratio game. The more no's you get, the more yeses you'll eventually get.
Yep. So. For sure. Yep. It's all, like you said, you got to fill the top of the funnel with as many leads as you can. And then, that's where the deals are going to come from. So, Chris, thank you so much for coming on today. Really appreciate your time. How can our audience really, get more involved with you, keep in touch with you, all of that?
Yeah, I'll say, follow me on YouTube, Instagram as well. My Instagram handle is Investor. So I'm always on there, always dropping gems. Catch me on Clubhouse.
Yep.
So I'm around. I'm here, and always trying to give as much information as I can away.
Love it. Awesome. Well, thank you again, Chris. I really enjoyed this conversation. And to everyone watching, this is Matt Camp again with DealMachine, and happy deal finding.